Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the next session, which is going to cover CVs and cover letters. I'm also going to give you some useful hints and tips for job search, and also some other items in terms of talking a little bit about skills and also how you can prepare for the upturn in recruitment that the industry is going to be facing in the next few months, we hope. But mainly going to cover CVs and cover letters and how you can make the most out of these two documents when you start to apply. So hopefully everybody can see my screen there. Do let me know if you can't, but hopefully everybody can see that. So my name is Nicholas Davis and I am the Careers and Skills Lead at the Royal Aeronautical Society. I've worked in aviation now for coming up to about 10 years. I'm a flight operations specialist, so that's what I've done pretty much straight from graduating university to coming to the society about 2 years ago in this education and career support role. So, and it's a pleasure to be able to speak to you virtually. Obviously, we would have loved to have done this event face to face, but you know, this is the new way of working at the moment. So hopefully you guys have been able to use the platform and chat to all our exhibitors in their virtual booths and also attend some of the talks as well. So we'll just move on and we'll get started and talk about CVs, and I'll take some questions at the end as well. So we're going to talk about making the most out of your CV. So your CV is still a vitally important document. Yes, in the world of online application forms and things like that, in some aspects CVs aren't becoming as popular, but they are still an essential tool for you to find a job, because a lot of smaller companies, they don't have online systems, so you still need to use CVs and cover letters when you are sending out applications. So use the spare time you've got effectively, you know, to really enhance your CV. Get as much advice as possible from absolutely everybody you can think of, you know, within your network, but also, you know, attending events like these, having a chat to careers advisors and career specialists who might be able to give you the best advice possible. So essentially getting started with your CV is generally there should be 4 rules that you should follow. Now, within the UK, there's no written rule in terms of how to structure and write a CV, unlike perhaps some other countries where they like you to include photographs and things like that, and a set structure, whereas in the UK, there isn't that set criteria, that set structure. So really, however you decide to lay out your CV is up to you. But we're just able to give you some general best practice in terms of what the industry tells us that they like to see on CVs. So in terms of getting started, these 4 elements really should be the key focus when thinking about a CV. Number 1 should be the structure and the length. So the structure is one of the most important parts of the CV. It needs to be logically structured, easy to read, because most employers will spend about 8 seconds reading your CV, so really not a long time at all. So the CV really needs to stand out and make sure that it's capturing the reader's attention at the end of the day. Second to that is the length. It should be 2 pages maximum. And then the second point on here is content and originality. So you need to make sure the content is obviously relevant to the industry that you're interested in applying to, but also matches your skill set. And also things like lying on CVs, please avoid that. You'll be surprised at how many CVs, both young people and more experienced people, that I've seen where people have actually lied on their CV. You will get found out eventually. So, you know, make sure everything is original and you're able to back up your statements that you make in your CV in an interview, for example. Third is the design. So a lot of CVs are over formatted. So yeah, where people use lots and lots of different fonts, different paragraphs, different line spacings and things like that. I'd avoid over formatting, but still make it look attractive, still make it look as though it's a professional document. But don't over format it by using lots and lots of different fonts, colors, pictures. So I would avoid that as well. Make sure the design is clear. And then finally, point number 4 is there must be no mistakes on a CV. So that's in things like grammar, spelling, punctuality, punctuation, not punctuality, punctuation. There should be no mistakes whatsoever. So you need to make sure your CV is proofread. You proofread it by yourself, get somebody else to proofread it, whether it's a family member, a friend, a tutor, a careers advisor, somebody you work with. Get somebody to check it all the time. You know, every time you redraft it, get somebody to check it and iron out those mistakes. Because the mindset I like to get into when writing a CV is in my sort of operational head, my flight ops head. And that's, if I was to send this document to the flight crew with a mistake, that could compromise the safety of that aircraft. So that's the mindset I like to get into when writing a CV is, you know, if I was to make a mistake, you know, this could compromise safety. And, you know, that is the mindset that us as aviation specialists, aviation professionals, we need to get in that mindset. So think about that for your CV as well. And in terms of the general best practice for CVs, these are just some sections that your CV really should cover. So 2 pages maximum should be the length. Now, I know it's quite difficult to put everything down on 2 pages, but you start to spread over 2 pages and employers just won't read it. So, you know, try to fit everything you possibly can on 2 pages. And this is where the structure really comes into play. Avoid using too many bullet points because that takes up a lot of space. Use all the space you have on that page as well. And using things such as line spacing as well can actually make it a bit easier to navigate. But you need things like your name and your details at the very top. What a lot of people are including now are things like your LinkedIn link. So those of you who have LinkedIn addresses and LinkedIn profiles, you can include that at the top as well, because a lot of employers will like to do a search online as well for you. Contact details as well, and then followed by your objective or your short personal profile. This should be included at the top of your CV. This is something that's often missed on a lot of CVs, but it's really important just having a really short paragraph, sort of 2 to 3 sentences at the top of your CV, highlighting you as an individual, you know, what you're seeking, what you've done in the past in terms of work experience or education, and, you know, what your goal is, you know, what is that long-term goal, essentially. And that is often the first thing that's read by employers. And if that captures their attention, they're going to carry on reading your CV. So, you know, that is something important to do. Followed by your education. Those of you studying at the moment, it's really important to emphasize the modules you are studying as part of your degree, for example, and any sort of group projects or final year dissertations and things like that. Really important to emphasize that in your education. Followed by sort of work experience and any employment history. This is where you can include things like volunteering experience as well. And you could even break this down into sort of different types of experience, you know, whether it's related to the industry, whether it's volunteering, part-time work, anything like that really. And now I've highlighted on here point 6, which is a skills section. So this is really important for those of you who are early to the industry, or who perhaps are just entering your career in, is highlighting your skills on your CV, your transferable skills. And this is going to be really important going forward when we enter this sort of post-COVID environment within the industry. Is employers are going to be looking for what transferable skills you can bring to the table. And there's such things, you know, as teamwork, time management, communication. But as I'll point out later, there's some other more specific sort of 21st century skills that you might want to include on your CV as well. And it just shows the employer what you're good at as well. And then finally, last couple of things can really be tailored to you. The CV, employers do like to see a bit of, personality in CVs. So this is where you can highlight that in sort of an other section, whether that's hobbies, interests, any achievements. This is where you need to highlight that. Followed by 2 references. Now, you don't have to put the full detail of the reference, so because that does just take up space that can be used for other sections. But what you can do to save some space is just mention that your references are available upon request, just as a little caveat, sort of at the bottom of the CV. And that just shows employers that you've got references that are available. And one, ideally, if you're still studying, needs to be academic, and then another one does need to be professional as well. And then finally, you must check it over for spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So please, you must check it as well, because that's going to be the first thing that an employer will notice is spelling and punctuation and grammatical errors. Where things become slightly different, so I've broken it down here in terms of best practice between a CV that's more focused on early career professionals, so those of you who are just starting out in the industry, and those of you who are a little bit more experienced, who perhaps have been working in the industry already. And this is where CVs can differ slightly, but still with some general best practices. So for a CV that's more experienced, it should still be 2 pages long. Now, again, I know the difficulty in that, particularly if you've worked in the industry for, say, 10 years plus. But it's still important to identify the bits of experience, the bits of content that you want employers to see. And things like, this is where you can cut down on things like your education, things like your A-levels, GCSEs, O-levels, whatever, they're not going to be as relevant. So I would avoid sort of putting down all of your qualifications and your education, but still needs to follow the general structure. So things like your personal details at the top, that's still that personal profile and career objective. It's slightly differently laid out in terms of that we like to see skills and achievements come after that, after your personal profile at the top of the page. And they're things such as any key achievements as part of your role, and also any achievements as part of any training you've done as part of your current employment, and again, any key transferable skills. Followed by your employment history. Now again, I would work in reverse chronological order, so make sure that your most recent employer sort of is at the top, and if you're struggling for space, I would be quite ruthless here and cut back in terms of experience that might be, say, a few years sort of down the line, or in a few years in the past. And then again, another sort of leisure and interests or other activities section, and then same again with references, is you can have 2 references. If you're a long time away from education, they can be 2 professional ones. And again, you can just use references available upon request as a caveat, rather than the entire details of the references that you've got as well. So that's where things are slightly different if you are an individual who is a little bit more experienced. What I would say in terms of early careers, it's still important to pop all of your education into your CV if you are an early career professional, where again you can be quite stringent, quite strict with yourself, as if you are going over 2 pages. It's really important to focus on things like your degree, so the most up-to-date qualification that you are studying. If you are running over 2 pages, don't feel afraid to cut out your GCSEs, for example, unless the job specifically, the job description specifically asks for GCSEs. But again, in the world of online application forms, these are often covered, so you don't necessarily have to repeat them in your CV as well, because they're often covered within the online application form section. So you don't necessarily need to be listing every single grade you got at GCSE, because it's just going to take up far too much space. So we're going to move on to cover letters now, briefly. say, because cover letters are still really, really important. And yet we do still need them in the 21st century because, as I mentioned earlier, the industry still relies quite heavily on these methods of recruitment. So not just sort of online application forms that we know are becoming popular. But a cover letter essentially is another document for you to demonstrate your motivation for the role that you're applying for. So it's a bit of extra information other than your CV that you can sort of shout about yourself and sell yourself to that employer. And it's an opportunity for you to highlight key parts of your CV that you weren't able to really emphasize on your CV, for example. But it also helps the employers, it also helps you demonstrate the knowledge you have in relation to that role that you're applying for, but also the research you've done on that company as well. This is the part of an application where you can also address any issues that you might have, whether that's any issues you might have with recruitment methods, or any issues you've spotted as part of the role, whether it's the qualifications that you hold, the experience you have. So this is again where you can sort of highlight any issues you could potentially have with the job in question and ask those questions as well. Structure-wise, again, it should be, like any other sort of professional letter, with sort of your name and address at the top, the employer details as well, followed by a salutation, so, dear so-and-so, and then a short introductory paragraph, and then 2 to 3 paragraphs addressing your skills, knowledge, but also anything else you really want to highlight to that employer that will make you stand out. And then just a sort of concluding or a finishing off paragraph. And what I would do is I would make sure that you mention your CV early on in the cover letter, because that's where you want people to focus their attention at, is your CV, not the cover letter. So within that introductory paragraph, I would just say that, you've got a CV attached, please see my CV, and so on, because that's where you want the employer's eyes to be drawn to, essentially. So yeah, as I've mentioned, refer to that CV early on. Showcase within the cover letter that you've done your research within that company, and that's going further than the About Us page on their website. See what projects they're working on. Have they been involved in any government consultations? Because I know a lot of aerospace companies are heavily involved in those sorts of things. What sort of new projects have they announced recently? There's a lot of work being done on sort of hybrid electric aircraft, UAM, space as well. So have a look and delve a little bit deeper than just the basic information that they've got on their website. Also, cover letters and CVs are really useful for what's called speculative applications. So this is where an employer may not necessarily have a vacancy available for you to apply for, but this is just where you are interested in working for that company, and you just send off a speculative application, essentially, for a role that doesn't necessarily exist, but the hope that they will keep you in mind, they'll keep your name and CV on file, and then when any vacancies do come up, you'll hopefully be the first to be contacted. So this is really useful to have these documents prepared for you to send speculative applications as well. I'm just going to reiterate it again. Make sure you check your cover letter the same way you would with a CV, just ironing out any spelling, grammatical, or punctuation errors as well. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about online application forms, because we know they're a massive part of the sector now. And they're essentially a way to create a level playing field for candidates, and to find out a bit more about you in a little bit more detail, and also manage high levels of applications. But what online application forms do as well is they actually scan for keywords within your application. So a top tip from me is, when you are going through online application forms, make sure you have the person specification and job description in front of you, and then match some keywords in that job description with your answers, okay, to the questions. Because the system is going to be scanning your answers for questions, for words that match the job description. So that's a top tip from me. And I've done it as well, where I've seen a long application form and not applied for a job. So they are also a tool to make sure not every single person applies as well. So just a couple of points from me in terms of how you guys can prepare yourselves for upturn, because there is going to be a recruitment upturn, hopefully within the next few years as the industry recovers quite dramatically, and the industry will return to a good period of growth. I'm really confident in that. And these are some of the latest skills that are coming through now in terms of 21st century skills. So I'm just going to mention a couple on here, but you can see these for yourselves. And the slides will be available afterwards as well. Things like your tech savviness, your creativity, your digital coding skills, your commitment to learning and critical thinking. These are all really important skills for you to develop. And if you've got examples of where you've used these skills, that's really important to mention, not only in a CV, but also in an online application form and within interview settings as well. So some final hints and tips from me before I just move on to how we can help you as well. So remember to carry on being active, but keep being selective. You want to make sure that roles match your skills. And I wouldn't be tempted to apply for absolutely everything at the moment if you're in that position, because you want to make sure that the next role you go into really matches your skill set, and you're going to be happy in that. Also, as we know, with what's going on at the moment with coronaviruses, the industry is very resilient. It will recover. Like I've said on here, the industry has weathered many storms in the past. Yes, this is something that the industry has never faced before. However, it's very resilient and it will recover. So you need to be prepared for this upturn. You also need to work out your transferable skills and also whether these could help, could be applied to different roles and different sectors as well, because a lot of engineers pilots, operations specialists, people who generally work in the aviation industry have a great deal of transferability between different sectors, whether it's retail, whether it's another engineering sector such as civil or mechanical or automotive. So there really is a lot of transferability between different sectors. Being flexible is key. So the industry isn't spread generally across the UK. There is a hive of activity in certain hotspots within the UK, but the more flexible you are in terms of things like your location, then the better chance you have of securing a job within the sort of sector that you're interested in. And keeping visible, activating that network. We're all using LinkedIn now, and that's becoming quite powerful. So don't be afraid to connect with people and build that dialogue with individuals as well. And carry on making yourself more employable. Make sure that you're upgrading your skills and your knowledge, keeping informed with what's going on in the industry, whether that's reading aviation publications, attending lectures, conferences, seminars, doing some free courses, trying to get as much advice as you possibly can. This is going to benefit you in the long term when you're applying for jobs. So finally, just a bit of information on how we can help. So we do provide a free careers guidance service at the Society, and you can contact us directly on careers@aerosociety.com or careersandaerospace.com, which is our dedicated website for you to get advice. As you can imagine, we are being a bit overwhelmed at the moment with inquiries, so it is taking us a little bit longer to get back to people. But if you do want to arrange a one-to-one discussion with a member of our team, then please do get in touch with us, and we will get back to you eventually. It might take us a little bit longer, but due to this current circumstances, we are a little bit overwhelmed. We're a very, very small team, but we will get back to you if you want to arrange a one-to-one conversation. We also have some final bits and pieces for you to learn and develop your knowledge. So you can apply for the free membership at the Royal Aeronautical Society. And as part of that membership, you get access to materials that can help develop your knowledge. So that's things such as our Aerospace magazine, which is available electronically and in print. Attending a whole host of online webinars, free lectures, conferences and events programs. We have the National Aerospace Library that's based in Farnborough, so you can access that for free. and we have a huge collection of over 25,000 online resources as well. And then followed by insight blogs. We publish blogs pretty much on a daily basis on things to do with the sector. So I'd encourage you to, if you're just interested in reading around aerospace and aviation, to check those out. And there's the email address again for you at the bottom there, guys. Just drop us an email if you wanted to carry on the conversation further, or you want to arrange a one-to-one advice session. I will take a couple of questions, but I'm just conscious of time before we have the next session. But the Royal Aero Society and Careers in Aerospace has its own virtual booth. So please do drop in there if you want to take the conversation further. And you can also drop myself and the team an email at that email address there at the bottom. So I've seen a couple of questions come in. I'll take a couple before I do have to leave you for the next session. So let's have a look. What should you write for your personal profile? So that's the profile at the very top of the CV. So this is things such as explaining what you're currently doing, whether you're studying, whether you're working, what you're seeking. So whether you're seeking a role within aerospace design or propulsion, avionics, operations, airport management, and then what the long-term goal is. Is the long-term for you to become professionally registered as an engineer, chartered, or is the goal to become a manager and things like that? In terms of references, can we have 2 academic references? If you're not able to get a professional reference from a workplace, for example, then yes, that's absolutely fine. I have seen places suggesting us write the address of the employer in the cover letter, and some telling it's not required what's suggested. So yeah, again, this is where there's going to be conflicting information on CVs. Unfortunately, we can only tell you what the industry has told us. Generally speaking, it is up to you, but the employers do like to see a letter written in a formal style, which is your address, but also the employer's address as well. How do you demonstrate 21st century skills? Well, that's generally done through your education, your work experience. Whether you, particularly within education, if you're using any complex systems in terms of the tech savviness. And then obviously when you're in work as well, you're going to develop those sort of emotional skills, that emotional resilience, that sort of critical thinking as well, critical thinking within education. So that's where you can demonstrate and use examples from education and work experience, for example. So unfortunately, guys, that's all the time I've got for questions. I'm really sorry. But please do carry on the conversation. Go and visit the Careers in Aerospace and Aviation live team virtual booth. So that's where my colleagues are. So you can carry on the conversation there. And if anybody does want to speak to me directly, my details are also on the event platform we've got, or you can contact us via that team address there as well. So thank you very much, guys. And I'm going to hand over to the Honourable Company now, who are going to talk to you about pilot careers. So thank you ever so much, guys.